Good evening, I'm Brian Reagan. This is
Tyler Kelly.
And we welcome you to our Twilight Talks on the Psalms. And tonight we are in Psalm 78, verses 56 through 66. Tyler?
Yet they tested and provoked the Most High God and did not keep his testimonies, but turned back and acted unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow, for they provoked him to anger with their high places, and moved him to jealousy with their carved images. When God heard this, he was furious and greatly abhorred Israel, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent he had placed among men, and delivered his strength into captivity, and his glory into the enemy's hand. He also gave his people over to the sword, and was furious with his inheritance. The fire consumed their young men, and their maidens were not given in marriage. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. Then the Lord awoke as from sleep, like a mighty man who shouts because of wine, and he beat back his enemies. He put them to a perpetual reproach.
All right, so we have some really interesting imagery going on here. First of all, you ever wake someone up that definitely did not want to be woken up?
I've generally tried avoiding it, but yes, a couple of times.
Yeah. So then imagine that same person, waking up in that mood, but then raging like someone who's drunk. Yeah, that's how the Lord has chosen to classify himself here as far as his manner. And this is one of those that when you read the Bible, keep in mind that God has to use imagery that we can comprehend to grasp a concept of what's actually going on with him. And so it's interesting God uses that kind of imagery. But the other part of it is that people have this ridiculous notion, Tyler, that God, God won't let his worship fail or whatever. And as you look at this incident talking about Shiloh, this is the time of the end of the judges and the beginning of the monarchy. We're in that transition stage is what he's talking about here, very specifically. And the tabernacle actually stood longer than the Temple of Solomon did. And if what we read about Shishak coming up from Egypt, the Ark of the Covenant was taken out by him, and the rest of the furniture of the temple was taken out by Nebuchadnezzar. And so as far as actual time of either structure with the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle in Shiloh holds the record for the longest single structure that housed the Ark of the Covenant. But people became idolatrous about the Ark of the Covenant, Tyler. Mm-hmm. And, that whole incident, remember who was judge and priest at the time?
Priest was Eli. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to assume that judge, that would mean it's got to be Samuel.
Oh, no, the judge was still Eli.
Okay, the judge was Eli as well. Okay.
Eli was a judge and a priest.
Right.
Samuel was a judge priest, and prophet. So you say Samuel, Samuel did priestly functions and duties, even though he was not technically a Levite. He did not do high priestly duties, but he did do priestly duties throughout the land as a judge. Mm-hmm. And do you remember how the incident came down with the Ark of the Covenant?
They were always, I think they were fighting the Philistines, because that's usually who they were fighting with at the mm-hmm. time. And they were going into battle, and they're like, hey, every time we bring the Ark of the Covenant with us to battle, we always win because we have the Ark with us. So let's bring it again. And didn't God say not to go or something like that?
Yeah, God said, don't take it. You aren't going to win today. I'm not on your side.
And they're like, but the Ark of the Covenant means we'll win. So they took it with them anyways. And they lost the Ark of the Covenant.
And, and the loss of the Ark of the Covenant, for people who think, God will never let the church disappear from America. First of all, you're arrogant. Number one. Number two, you do realize there's more Christians outside the United States than there are inside the United States. More people are converted in India in 1 year than are converted in the United States. And don't go, but they've got over 1 billion people, that's why. No, that's not why. And they're not trying to make converts like Americans are to sell books and pay for coffee bars in church buildings so that people feel connected to Jesus. No. They're there to make converts who are converted to Jesus Christ, who are willing to sacrifice their lives in service to the King. And so when the ark is in that land, Tyler, what happened when the ark was in with the Philistines? Do you remember?
They decided to stick it in the temple to their gods.
Temple of Dagon.
Because they realized that this ark is important, and this ark is important to their gods, so we at least need to keep it with our God's stuff and not just leave it out in the middle of nowhere. But then their gods topple over and break off from the feet and topple and
feet and hands and the head fall off, and it's
and so they land at the feet of the Ark of the Covenant. But then something, if I remember correctly, happened to the people of
they were struck with hemorrhoids.
Yeah, that was it.
Yes. And as part of their offering back, hemorrhoids and rats.
Right, hemorrhoids and rats.
And rats.
Not a good combination.
And so the Ark of the Covenant does come back after a while with golden statues made in the shape of rats and hemorrhoids.
We're just going to leave this in a house with a bunch of gold statues of rats and hemorrhoids. And here you go. This is where you can find it. Take it away, please.
Pretty much. And then the Lord rouses up. The time of Saul comes. Saul does a devastating warfare overall against the Philistines. David will pretty much finish and expand. So the Lord says, yeah, when I wake up, when I come back, when I'm finally ready to start dealing with y'all again.
Mm-hmm.
But never lose sight of that. If you're not going to actually keep the Lord's word and act in faith, you've got problems.
Mm-hmm.
And this psalm is a good reminder of that. I'm Brian Reagan. This is
Tyler Kelly.
You have anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Then, Lord willing, we'll see you in the morning.